In his IGN review back in 2012, Greg Miller wrote that Book of Memories is unlike any Silent Hill game that came before. It's a sentiment I believe a lot of us agreed with back then. I agreed with it, despite never owning a copy of the game or the portable system it was exclusively playable on. I mean, look at it. There's no foggy town, the camera is on bird's eye level, and it's multiplayer. Yet franchise producer at the time, Tom Hewlett, insisted that this game was the real deal.
It's a little bit different. It's more of a dungeon crawler than players are used to, but I think it still feels like an authentic Silent Hill experience once you get there and you play it yourself.
It has all the things people like in Silent Hill, just in a slightly different way. You're still using a flashlight, the rooms are pretty dark and you have to look around that way. So I just encourage fans to not judge it by first appearances. We didn't just slap Silent Hill on a dungeon crawler, so it doesn't have to feel like Silent Hill. It is a little different, but I don't think it's un-Silent Hill. And hopefully once people play it, they will agree.
And here's the thing. After finally having played the game myself, I agree with Tom. Don't get me wrong, Book of Memories is now, by far, my least favorite Silent Hill game, and I feel like there's a good chance it'll keep that title for the rest of my life. But the issue isn't that it's nothing like the Silent Hill games that came before. The real issue is actually kind of the opposite. Book of Memories opens with a player character of your own design receiving the titular book in the mail. They quickly discover that the book has recorded every single event of their life, after which they feel compelled to try and rewrite one of them. This, unsurprisingly, comes at a cost. As they go to sleep, their dream takes the shape of a dungeon-crawling video game. Every dungeon or zone is compiled with a series of procedurally generated rooms, connected by procedurally generated corridors. While the corridors occasionally offer interesting scenery, their purpose is traversal, and traversal only. The rooms, on the other hand, may contain everything from monster encounters and puzzle pieces to shops and so-called scare rooms. Your goal in each zone is to locate puzzle instructions, survive a number of combat challenges to acquire the necessary pieces to complete the final puzzle, and move on to the next zone. After every third zone, there is a boss fight, and after every defeated boss, you're moved to a new world. Which is a nice way of saying that you keep doing the exact thing as before, but with a different wallpaper. That sounds absolutely nothing like Silent Hill, I hear some of you say. Well, allow me to compare with the gameplay loop in previous Silent Hill games. You enter an area, more often than not indoors, and work towards solving a grander puzzle in order to progress. Meanwhile, you avoid or fight monsters and collect weapons, ammunition, and recovery items to raise your chances of survival. At some point, you might come across a particularly haunted place, like the Mirror Room from Silent Hill 3, or the Big Head Mode Eileen Room from Silent Hill 4, places with no other purpose than to unnerve you. And finally, some areas are concluded with a boss fight. Isn't that a somewhat reductive comparison, given that Book of Memories belongs to an entirely different subgenre? Yes, it is. And that is exactly my point. Book of Memories retains all the recognizable components of a Silent Hill game, but they have been reduced to their most rudimentary forms. In other words, Book of Memories is like a greatest hits album. But just for the bass parts. The puzzles are a good place to start. Here's what the director of the game, Adam Tierney, had to say about them in an interview with RPG Gamer.
Early in development, we researched the puzzles from every previous Silent Hill game and boiled them down to what we felt were the basic underlying systems. We didn't want any puzzles in this game to be canned, where you could say, oh, I saw that one 3 zones back. So we constructed an organic puzzle system that has a variety of pieces, modifiers, quantities, and boards, which builds each puzzle randomly per zone.
In practice, this design approach does indeed result in the most basic of Silent Hill puzzle designs. And I do mean puzzle singular. The solutions differ slightly, but every solution boils down to which order you're supposed to place the puzzle items. That the objects are different sizes or colors doesn't change the fact that it's essentially the same puzzle repeated ad nauseum. The developers at WayForward clearly did the research Adam Tierney mentioned, because there have been puzzles like this in the franchise's past. The coin cabinet puzzle from Silent Hill 2, for example. But where there was once poetry behind the puzzle designs, sometimes literally, there's now only a numerical science. The goal of the puzzles isn't storytelling. its replayability. There are a total of 500 zones in Book of Memories, though a significant chunk are optional. There was no chance in hell that WayForward were gonna make custom puzzles for each one. Likely it was either this, or no puzzles at all. The question is, did WayForward pick the better option? Puzzles are a key component of the mainline Silent Hill games, but being like the games that came before didn't exactly work to Book of Memories' benefit in this case, did it? The same design philosophy is on display in the scare rooms. While they were never so blatantly called that in past Silent Hill games, they were certainly present. The contents of these rooms tend to inspire fear and morbid curiosity in equal measure, which in a sense make them the perfect representation of why we play horror games in the first place. These images are chilling and grotesque, but that's precisely what we want from a horror game. We dread being scared, but we also crave it. Naturally, WayForward wanted to satisfy that itch in Book of Memories, though once again, it is quantity that takes priority over quality. And once again, the quantity isn't even that high. In one of the potential scare rooms, you're greeted by rows of televisions telling you the news story about a man who selflessly gave his money to charity. You can choose to smash these televisions, or wait for the story to conclude. In another room, a circle of stationary mannequins have surrounded a young mannequin girl. You can choose to destroy the mannequins, or not. In a different room is a similar young girl, and you can choose to play hide and seek with her, against her wishes, or not. There is some level of intriguing artistry here, like how the implication of what those aforementioned mannequins are gonna do to the girl is way more effective than anything the game could have shown explicitly. Though even that frightening idea is lessened once you learn that you will be seeing this exact scenario play out over and over again. Just like the puzzles, these rooms are here because they are a part of the Silent Hill formula, though their practical application couldn't be more different. Someone might be unnerved by these rooms. Horror is subjective after all. But their primary purpose is to observe your actions and move the dial that determines the game's ending accordingly, which the game already determines based on which enemies you kill and whose blood you collect afterwards. So I ask again, did WayForward really pick the better option here? If the scare rooms don't live up to their name, or at the very least fail to meet the visually provocative quality of past Silent Hill games, should they have been included at all? Despite the shift in subgenre and camera perspective, combat and exploration in Book of Memories are the components that are most recognizably Silent Hill. It is once again heavily simplified, but the gameplay loop of choosing your battles, killing enemies only when absolutely necessary, gathering medkits to heal yourself and keys to open doors, these steps are all intact. The enemies you encounter are equally recognizable. You got the dogs, nurses, Pyramid Head, the Butcher, these pterodactyl-looking motherfuckers, Silent Hill 4 ghosts, the goddamn Needlers! Now, depending on how many people end up watching this video, there's gonna be between 1 and thousands who are thinking, none of these monsters belong here. They were specific to the nightmares of the protagonists and antagonists of the other games. And to that I say, it doesn't matter. To use the greatest hits analogy again, it's like being upset about your favorite songs being featured anywhere else but the albums they were originally released on. And the intention here clearly was to be kind of a greatest hits album. What matters is that, regardless of the game's faithfulness to franchise iconography, Book of Memories is just fucking boring. Once I had passed the initial couple of hours, I kept prolonging the time between all future play sessions for as long as I possibly could. If I'm being perfectly honest, Book of Memories is the only Silent Hill game I've actively chosen not to finish. The game acknowledges and adapts the gameplay loop of its predecessors, but in its attempt to be a Silent Hill experience in microcosm, it turns that gameplay loop into a repetitive, mechanical chore, completely devoid of frights. The main objectives are always the same. The tiny amount of story is always secondary to the copious amounts of monster fighting you have to do, and the degradable weapons don't add any stakes or tension to the combat. Because no matter how much you level up, no matter what powerful weapons you end up acquiring, you rarely feel like you're making any actual progress. Instead, you're just going through the same motions again and again. Horror deflates with repetition, and despite all its procedural generation, repetition is ironically all that Book of Memories seems to have. And I don't believe that's because it's a dungeon crawler. I have admittedly not played that many games in this subgenre, but even I know they're not inherently antithetical to traditional storytelling. Labyrinth of the Demon King is a recent example of a retro-inspired dungeon crawler that is packed with as much implicit and explicit storytelling as the ground is covered in the blood of your fallen enemies. However, the problem is related to the kind of dungeon crawler WayForward was asked to make. That is, a cheap one. As far as I'm aware, no Konami suit has come out and said this publicly, but their actions at the time speak volumes. Just look at how they handle remasters of their IPs, rather than hiring a studio like Bluepoint Games, who had previously provided Konami with well-received HD remasters of their Metal Gear Solid games, and had a good track record with previous HD remasters to boot. They gave the task of remastering Silent Hill 2 and 3 to a tiny studio called Hijinks, a studio with no previous experience with remastering games, and they were given unfinished source codes to make it happen. Downpour, the next mainline entry in the series, was handed to Vatra Games, another small studio with only one previous project completed, and it wasn't exactly critically acclaimed either. At least WayForward had the luxury of not being bought or shut down after their Silent Hill game shipped.
So I did Book of Memories with Konami, Silent Hill, and we got WayForward to develop it. So I knew they could do atmospheric stuff, and Konami was having trouble finding developers for this, and I just didn't want it to go to a weird developer. It was already, again, this is Book of Memories, so it was already a strange project. One week my boss said, hey, you can produce another Silent Hill. It's for this Vita thing. You can do whatever you want. And I made a really cool pitch about how to do Silent Hill on this touchscreen. And then a week later, his boss said, it should be a dungeon crawler. So then it was a dungeon crawler because that was the big boss. WayForward and I were saddled with this. How do you make a Silent Hill dungeon crawler? And then we did the best that we could with that task.
You set it in a sewer?
Perhaps WayForward would have relied on procedural generation anyway. Perhaps it would have been just as dull to play. But I can imagine a Silent Hill dungeon crawler with a higher budget that would have actually worked. But Pim, how can you say that without having finished the game? Didn't you yourself make a whole video criticizing people for judging a game they hadn't completed? First of all, how dare you interrupt me again? And secondly, I don't believe it would have mattered if I'd completed my playthrough of Book of Memories, because I would still not have experienced it the way WayForward intended.
We've always had in the back of our minds, like, could Silent Hill work multiplayer, and what would that be like, and how would that work? And in the end, we settled on multiplayer. Book of Memories is the first multiplayer game in the Silent Hill series.
You can play Book of Memories on your own, like I did, the same way you can, technically, play World of Warcraft on your own. But both games were primarily made with multiplayer in mind. Although while World of Warcraft servers are still going strong 2 decades later, Book of Memories is, fittingly, an online ghost town. Having 3 additional players to team up with wouldn't have removed all the game's cons, but it would have added some pros. The story of Book of Memories is that you try to change events involving people you, as the player, have zero connection with, and the game is way too busy procedurally generating dungeons for you to crawl through to have much time over for character development. You do, however, care about your real-life friends. Hopefully, even strangers, if you have to depend on them to ensure your own survival. With more people, there's the choice of strategizing, of choosing when to stick together and when to split up to cover more ground. And there's a lot of space for tension to build in between. Maybe you leave the group behind and end up in a situation that is way out of your depth. Will your teammates be quick enough to come to the rescue? Are they caught up in their own harrowing situations? Do you stand your ground, or do you flee? Those moments are stories in and of themselves, and in this case, they would have been way more personal than the story that was actually written for you. In addition to unsettling horrors and introspective stories, Silent Hill is also fairly synonymous with clunky combat systems, a tradition that is honored in Book of Memories. But even by Silent Hill standards, it feels especially cumbersome. Instead of tilting the movement stick and then pressing the dodge button, like in most games. Book of Memories asks you to hold down the dodge button first, and then choose the direction you wish to move to, which may not sound all that complicated, but add a short input delay and it becomes the difference between a dodging system that works and one that is barely worth using whatsoever. There's a combo system that requires you to hit the attack button at the exact moment the previous attack landed, which is such a finicky task that I eventually gave up on using that mechanic too. Not to mention that having the attention of every enemy in a small room all at the same time may leave you open to so many consecutive hits that you might end up losing half your health bar in the process of clearing it. With co-op partners, one player could get the enemy's attention, while the rest do the classic Dark Souls maneuver of slapping the hell out of its butt. You could use different close and long-range weapons to complement each other's playstyles and placements on the battlefield. And you could even distract an entire horde while one player looks for keys or recovery items. Having company wouldn't eliminate the issues, but it would make combat feel significantly more manageable. There's also the problem of even taking advantage of Book of Memories as a portable game. The zones are somewhat small, though not small or predictable enough that you can fully expect to start a run when you hop on the bus to work and be done with it before you step off. Add the fact that save point locations are randomized, making it even more difficult to time when you should end your play session, even on a longer trip. The safest way of playing Book of Memories solo is at home, in which case, why not just make it playable for a home console as well? Although, being portable does make Book of Memories very easy to bring along to planned sessions with friends, regardless if it's online or over a local Wi-Fi connection. Once you remind yourself that this was supposed to be a multiplayer game first and foremost, it's impossible to look at the overall package and not see that something is missing. So perhaps the game's biggest issue is simply that it was a victim of circumstance. It was commissioned by a stingy company, released on an allegedly failing handheld console, to an audience who had no interest in opening their minds to a Silent Hill game that superficially was so different from the ones they were used to. Unless you count the short-lived playable teaser for Silent Hills in 2014, which I have covered previously. This was the final entry in the series for 12 years. I doubt that WayForward knew that would be the case. But with that in mind, Book of Memories actually provided a deeply heartfelt send-off after all. I didn't finish the game, but I did scroll through the soundtrack to check out the end credit songs, which are oftentimes some of the best Silent Hill tracks of them all. This one, called Love Song, shares its title with the end credits track from the Born From a Wish expansion for Silent Hill 2. But this version has very different instrumentals, and, more importantly, lyrics.
This isn't the life that I dreamed it could be. I'm staring into the eyes of the shell left of me. And now every decision I make, the good, the pleasure, and the pain, could simply all be erased if I choose it to be. This nightmare unfolds like a rose awakes to the spring, always so close to the sanity I'm trying to cling to. I'm tearing out the pages 'cause it hurts, to be forced to feel the heart's break. How much of this torture can I take? Is it not worth the risk to create just one more try? I know that I can fix it. If you could rewrite our life any way that you please, would you tear out the pages of our memories? Would you take back the pain and all the hurt we create? Or could you be satisfied with the love that you've made with me? Pim, what the fuck am I reading?
These lyrics are clearly meant to reflect the central conceit of the Book of Memories. But as horror artist October Keegan pointed out to me, this was the very last Silent Hill track for a decade. Nobody knew if Silent Hill was ever going to come back. So in retrospect, one can easily interpret lines like, "Is it not worth the risk to create?" and "Could you be satisfied with the love that you made with me?" as a reflection on the legacy of Silent Hill, and what seemed to be its tragic end. Was it worth the risk to create something like Book of Memories, or any of the more disliked Silent Hill games that were developed in the West? I'd argue that it was. Despite being my least favorite Silent Hill game of the bunch, I will always be more satisfied with creative risks taken than with those that aren't. I'd much rather live in a world where I know what a Silent Hill dungeon crawler looks like than one where I don't. And through its creative failures, its attempts to reduce Silent Hill to its most basic and approachable form, it calls attention to why its predecessors, even the lesser ones, were more artistically successful. Had this been the end of Silent Hill, I would have been satisfied with the times I had with the franchise. Because Book of Memories reminds me of not just where Silent Hill went astray, but why everything the franchise did right is worthy of celebration. After all, you don't get a best-of album if you don't have a significant library of absolute bangers. When the end credits roll by and you return to the main menu, another fitting song plays, titled Now We're Free. And for a long time, we were free of new Silent Hill games. But to paraphrase Al Pacino in The Godfather Part 3, just when you thought you were out, the town pulls you back in. You know, I don't do this very often, but YouTube hasn't exactly been great at advertising my videos as of late. Heck, several times people have told me that they haven't been notified of my video releases at all. So if you like this video, and my other ones for that matter, it would mean a lot to me if you would give a like, share it around, click subscribe, and hit the bell. What would help even more would be to support me on Patreon. I'm still very far away from being able to work on this channel full time, but with your help, that could become a reality someday. And speaking of patrons, I'm now going to thank those who make monthly donations of $5 or more. They are 12p! Onaday, Callum Wally, Chromatophorium, D.E. Wright, Eben Phantom, Emmeline, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Evil A. Chance, Håvard Krugerud, Icarus Harker, Jesse Earl, Kalis, Labis, Losty, Nicole, Rowan Woodcock, Sablecow, Sethsard, Shkotsky, TB Skyen, The Sphere Hunter, and Vinders. I also want to thank Hotsider for the thumbnail, Foervraengd for the joke album cover, Mira Cox for editing the script, Delaney of Infinite Snow Productions, and Noah Gervais for providing their voices, Aurora, Freja Karolina, Sebastian, S. Lauftree, and Transparency Boo for the camera work, and Aurora, Freja Karolina, Hampus, Sebastian, and Sebulon for your special appearances. Oh, and thanks Transparency Boo for letting me borrow your PlayStation Vita.